Good afternoon, all our fabulous viewers, to a conversation on developing tools for community empowerment. Do we have our participant main guest, Filipe Araújo.
Hi, Kriya.
Welcome to the ScaleUp Porto booth, if you've just joined us, and well done for surviving until now. We're going to try and make it an engaging session for you. Joining the session with me today and this conversation will be myself, Kriya Mehta. I'm the International Relations Lead at Startup Amsterdam, representing the city of Amsterdam, and joined by the Vice Mayor of Porto, Mr. Filipe Araújo. A bit about myself. I represent the city of Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, we take cooperation with international communities very seriously. I also run the Startup City Alliance Europe, which is a very strong example of our efforts to strengthen our communities. This is also known as the Scale Network, and it is an alliance of 14 European cities who we work together to strengthen policies and strategies and ultimately connect the European ecosystem for entrepreneurs. And our goal with Scale is really to create a more connected Europe by learning and working together. Porto, here today, is one of these integral partner cities who we work very closely with to strengthen this pan-European international community. Therefore, I have the pleasure to introduce Filipe here to further explore Porto's approach to community empowerment. Filipe, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, it's a big pleasure to be here to join the conference and speak a little bit about Porto, what we are doing. First of all, I'm the vice mayor or the vice president of the city, and I'm entitled and responsible for the environment and innovation. So these are the two subjects that I deal with. And as a matter of fact, I'm city councillor for the past 7 years. Also, always with the environment and innovation, which more and more makes sense to bring together. So it's good to have this in part. So my background is coming from the telecommunications, so I'm also a lot related with these tech-based startups and all the startup scene that has been developed in the past years. Unfortunately enough, in Porto, we have a very strong on these areas, a lot supported by the academia, I must say. So a lot of universities in Porto that produce a very strong pool of talent and creative people. And so Porto right now, and to introduce the city, not myself only, is home of hundreds of tech-based companies, and they have been companies with very high potential that have been grown a lot in the past years. And this is due, of course, to the scientific and technology environment that naturally stimulates these new projects that we have been seeing. The startup, the ScaleUp Porto and the startup environment is more interesting than ever. We usually say that. The pandemic has shown us that there is a huge potential for many of our companies, but we also know that there is a lot to do, and I hope you have the time to discuss this during our conversation and to explain what we have been doing with ScaleUp Porto and this ambitious program that commits the city towards the promotion of a sustainable entrepreneurial ecosystem. So looking to the early stages, but also to the scale-up and fostering conditions to growth.
Thank you, Filipe. Yes, we know at Amsterdam ScaleUp Porto very well, and what a fantastic initiative this is. Maybe you can now explain in depth, as you say, why did you launch a program focused on the scale-up phase? Obviously, we are opposite. We've made Startup Amsterdam, and we call ourselves Startup Amsterdam. But how does your program specifically help and contribute to the topic here today of the empowerment of communities?
Very good. Now, Kriya, it's quite funny to look back to the time and since the beginning in 2014 when more or less I was challenged by the current mayor to lead this area, to lead the innovation area of the city. It was the first time that there was a city councillor responsible for innovation, and we our strategy is how to think about it, how we could make entrepreneurs to move forward. And we had a lot of studies at that time. Startup Amsterdam, lots of things were going on at that time, and they were supporting a lot of the development of the initial phase of the startups, and these studies, some of them at that time were being launched already focusing on the scale-up process, and I remember that in the end of 2014, I believe, the UK government, by an effort that was led by Sheriko too, launched the ScaleUp report on the UK economic growth. And more or less at that time, it was quite curious because we were already with the ScaleUp Porto, and that validated more or less our vision. So we, from then on, we have started to develop that strategy. The strategy is named ScaleUp Porto, but we also focus on the startup phase, like Startup Amsterdam focus on the startup phase and also on scale-up. It's the naming and the branding is probably sometimes doesn't give the big perspective where we are all working. But at that time, it makes sense to say, Europe, come on, look to the scale-up phase. It's very important, and we have to move on this very fast. As we know, the rest of the world, it's always looking to the scale up, and in Europe we had at that time the vision that we had to push on that phase. So we are not definitely doesn't mean that we are not looking to the early stage. We look to it. Okay. So what we saw is that in Europe, especially in Europe, there was a big amount of startups that were unable to scale their growth, and that worried us, and that's more or less what we focus at that time, because we know that the scale-ups they have a huge impact in terms of the economic development, and we need it for even to develop new startups. It's very important for us. So the integration of scale-ups in the entrepreneurial ecosystem promotes a set of positive effects, direct and indirect, and that was something that we took quite a look to it. These companies generate a lot of jobs in a very high rate, as we know, with high productivity, and the impact on the aggregate of the city economy, for example. It's very, very important, and usually important, and you could see that during this pandemic. So what we did at that time was, okay, we have to link together the public and the private entities, and to develop the measures that were very important to support this company that had a high potential, and to mitigate the challenges that they had during the growth. So our working was a very holistic approach, and including all the stakeholders. This was more or less what we did at that time, to have a glimpse of what we did since 2014.
Yeah, it's very similar to when I think back to how our directors set up Startup Amsterdam. And indeed, when you say about the naming, it can be misleading. And when we decided we wanted to go for an action program number 2 and really focus on the entire community, we thought, oh, let's change our name to ScaleUp Amsterdam. But of course, it's nothing in the name. We still should keep our brand Startup Amsterdam and
Sure.
And move forward. But how much then do you think, to what extent does policy influence the evolution of the ecosystem in your city, Porto? Because we are civil servants. We have to think of our role as the government. So yeah, regarding policy, what do you feel?
Well, to be honest, I think at least our strategy is more, it aims more on empowering the ecosystem. So not so much on the policy side, okay, but of course it has some, and especially with the national governments and some measures that can be taken. But we were mostly focused on empower the ecosystem, how we can support the connections, the networks, how we can have access to funding, how we can partner with the ecosystem on events, on making it possible for example, to have the startups connected to big companies. This was a lot of what we have been really pushing and working. So we usually see as enablers to facilitate the activity that is happening in the ecosystem. For example, one of the things that we do, and we are in the 4th edition, so it's the 4th year. The first 3 years we set up a call for activity. So we more or less ask the ecosystem, tell us what we want to do, what we want to promote, tell us if you want to involve more women in tech, or if you want to talk about patents, if you want to tell us and help the companies that have knowledge on this, for example, to help the other companies to move much faster. So we have involved around, in these last 3 years, around 8,500 people, a lot of activities, conference, meetups, awards, content creation, well, a lot of things. So this was very, very diverse. There was a jury to decide on which ones should we support. And of course, we have the 4th edition running this year. It's challenging due to the times that we are living, but it's very glad to see that the community is able to adapt and to keep generating value. So it's quite good for us to see that this is a proof that the ecosystem is very mature also, and very, they want to do things. But a lot of this is, I think the public and the private entities can work a lot together, and they can enable the creation and to foster new companies. And so this is important, and this is where I think the public money can be spent to enable this. The cooperation that we have between all stakeholders is more or less our manifesto. So the manifesto that when we started, it's more or less the genius of the building the cooperation, and shares the common vision of all of us, public and private. So it's not a matter of only the public sector wanted to do something, or the city councillor wanted to promote innovation. So it's not, we don't want things like that. We want to do it with the whole stakeholders in the city. Mm-hmm. So we usually don't go alone. So we always try to involve different partners in each activity, for example. So go together. It's a matter of promoting the networks, and the public entities should be always there for supporting activities that are aligned with this vision, and learn a lot of what are the other stakeholders doing. So for us, for example, you mentioned one. It's very important to be in the network like the Scale network. We are very eager to learn from different cities, very, very eager. I think we don't need to invent the wheel every time that we want to do something. So we have learned a lot from you, from Amsterdam, and from other cities. And I think that's the reason why we could accelerate in some areas faster. And that's more or less how we see it, our work.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, the active participation you play in the Scale network. And I feel exactly the same regarding public and private partnership. It's just so crucial. You talk a lot about the cooperation with the stakeholders. How do you guys actually promote this cooperation? What other mechanisms?
So, well, there is a lot that we do. So, well, the stakeholders, we have important stakeholders like the startup and scale-up networks, and from private sector. Fortunately enough, they understood that the organizing themselves is something also very important. We need people to talk that have the common vision. So we have a lot of organizations in Porto that are very that have done a long job and a very nice activities, and promoting together, also working because of different type of networks. So we work very closely with these networks. We are very close to the academia, to the universities, to the all the incubators and accelerators. This is something that we work daily with our team, because well, the world changed very fast, and we have to be very, very close to it. But I can say that we have a specific team, for example, just to and this is the connection that we also can do in the public sector, for example, to scout the startups that we have, to have information from them, and to see which startups, for example, can be applied to solve challenges that we have on the public sector. So this is something that we are also keen on doing it. So when I mention connecting big companies with startups or with scale-ups, I also mention connecting startups with our public, with the teams that I manage, with the public procurement, let's say like that. And this is also a big, I think, a big effort that we do, and we try with a specific team to understand what are the solutions that they already have, and maybe the public sector doesn't even know about it. So we have been doing a lot of things on this matter, and I think some of them have proved very successful, and I'm glad to see that there is a lot of work on that side.
Yeah, and when you say about the, so you mean the city can potentially be a launching customer for your startups, and your startups can really solve challenges that the city is facing, and not just the city as a whole, but really the government. Yes.
The challenges that you are facing, especially now when we talk about digital transition, when we talk about decarbonization of the economy, when you talk about circular economy, all of this, you have a lot of solutions from people, very bright people that we have in the city that already devise some solutions. And sometimes the public sector also has to pay attention to this, and that's our function. So that's our team that has to deal with that. Of course, this is a small part of it. What we want is companies that are from Porto to the world, and that can sell their products and be international. Okay, I'm just mentioning a small part that I feel that is my obligation to do. But sometimes the example to be able to have the first customer, as you know, or to be able to devise a pilot in a city is very, very important. And we know that there is a common word nowadays, but the living labs as we know it, and the piloting, but we keep on tracking that and making the city available for that. It's very important to have, and we are involved in several European projects, for example, where we have been testing really different solutions and tackling the problems that we face, that we know that we have to accelerate. And I totally believe that it's up to these bright minds, the bright talented people, technical, of course, also, and very skilled to come up with the bright ideas and the good ideas to work with the public and the private sector. And we know that there is a lot that the private sector will be involved in the future, because new business models will be in place. Business models much more related with sustainability, with social impact, and many other these things. And it's up to the cities also to foster this kind of things, because the cities will be responsible to solve the problem in climate change and many other things. It's up to the cities. This
has become just so much more important and relevant now with the global crisis we find ourselves. So also, Filipe, all of this amazing work you're doing over there in Porto, and learning from your neighbors, and cooperation with the network that I mentioned, also the Startup City Alliance Europe. How do you guys measure the impact of your work, and how do you really know that it is working?
Yeah, very good question. It's, well, that's something that, well, I'm an engineer, so measuring is something that we also always likes. You know, like to work without data is always a problem. But no, definitely in this area we can only act and plan if we understand what we are doing and what is going on. That's very important. So what we have been doing is really an effort to involve the culture of data, to have data from this all these things that we are doing, so we understand what is going on, what is the impact of the decisions that we make, what is the impact of ScaleUp Porto, for example, and to monitor especially the decisions and the evolution that the ecosystem is as a whole is going. So we have recently, for example, promoted and launched a study about what's going on, and a very depth study in terms of the ecosystem and all the analysis of its growth during the past years. And we also, for example, mapped all the ecosystem. There is a map that you can go to the ScaleUp Porto website, and you have the map of all the hundreds of scale-ups and startups and incubators and accelerators, and you can have a look of how they are growing and many other information that is there. So transparent and open data is also very important for people from abroad, for example, to understand how is the vibrant ecosystem that I mentioned here, but to have a look and to really feel how it is and to test it. It's important, of course. It's not a matter of marketing. It's a matter of really have the data and the benchmark of it. But we know, for example, that in Porto, the startups are growing in number and in dimension. They are creating a lot of jobs. They are even creating above the national average rates. Of course, the pandemic here introduced a factor that we all know, but they have around 28% annual growth rates of turnover, so it's quite impressive number. And since the ScaleUp Porto was launched, we know that also the startups are becoming ScaleUps earlier. So that's something that we are measuring, and we know this is happening. The average startup has a turnover 5 times higher than similar companies in the region. So it's quite big for these numbers. But of course, we share all these studies and information in our website. So I'm glad that everyone that is seeing us can go there, and we will be launching other studies very soon that you can see what we are doing. But I must say, I said it in the beginning, there is a lot of work to do. Okay, so it's a long way to do that we want to go, and what we want is that to see these indicators and to see them moving in the right direction. So we see that the work that we are doing in supporting the ecosystem is something with results, and that's very important. I believe that the measuring and the effectiveness of the public measures are something that we have to measure and give the feedback to the people that support us, and that's so very, very important for us.
It's something that we've really tried to work on a lot over the years, and it's a horrible question, I know, for organizations like ours, is measuring our impact, because how do we begin to do it? But indeed, it's just so interesting, everything you say, especially about startups becoming scale-ups quicker. These are measurable, more quantifiable means. So I think as well, the more we all keep learning from each other, keep sharing our best practices in Europe particularly, keep collaborating, we should really start to see each other as, well, we do already, some of us, but we don't compete with each other. We complement and collaborate with each other. And this is really something that I love to continue working on with Porto and with your great team over there.
Thank you.
I will look into the chat to see if we have any questions. We have a question, I think, from Govert van den Witteboer. How are you organizing it? Via a database or a platform? And I think perhaps this is for ScaleUp Porto or for Scale Cities. Shall we just say for ScaleUp Porto, how are you organizing?
Well, no, if I don't see if I get to exactly what is the point of the question, but like I said, we have all this data available, and there is a platform to, for example, to map the ecosystem. We work on this platform. I believe that it's also a platform that many other cities work with, which is also good, because it's good to have this interconnection between the numbers and what we are doing, and to like Kriya was saying, is that important that we know that in terms of European economy, that we are here collaborating and to increase the number of scale-ups that we need in Europe are still far from the number that we should have at this time, and we have to increase it.
Okay, great. It looks like you answered this question. I also have one from Daniela. She would like to challenge Filipe on how the community got together to foster COVID.
Okay, very
It's hard to avoid a COVID question, but thank you, Daniela.
No, it's a question that we have to answer, and I must say that I believe that happened everywhere. I'm also responsible for the Eurocities networks in terms of environment, and the cities have proven that they are up to the challenge when it comes to the pandemic, and there was a lot of effort everyone put together. But I must say that the entrepreneurs in that we have in Porto were very, very good. So they built a community that was Tech for COVID, that they just gathered so many people, so many solutions to cope with all the difficulties that you had at that time. So there was a lot of projects that came out of this in a very, very fast. So it's time to say thank you very much to all the guys that the guys and girls, okay, to all the people that were involved in this effort. It was a common effort, but Porto community was really very, very good, very, very good. I must say that from that we keep on working on COVID for lots of projects. Porto City has my right arm is Porto Digital Association, and Porto Digital is working right now in open data platform, let's say, to gather information from all the data sources that we have from bus companies, from metro, from mobile companies, from all the data sources that we have in order to provide information that is valid for all the health systems, all the decision maker processes. So we continue to work on that, and I believe that that proves also the maturity that we have in the ecosystem that we have in Porto.
It's wonderful. I'm going to pick one other one because of the time, which I think is quite a nice question for a city like Porto. Is any tips for non-capital cities, so also another word of saying is second-tier cities, to increase their profile?
Yeah, very good question. Okay, right. Well, that's always a good question when you have the centralized country as Portugal, so I can really answer that. Now, the truth is that we in cities, I think Kriya was also mentioning that we together and being in the networks, participating in the networks and learning from each other is the way to do it. I don't see any difference between, for example, the capital cities and Porto when we are in these networks. I think we build things together. But I believe that you have to create a strong message from yourself to have the right environment, so to push the right environment. If you have, like, for example, Porto has a very industrialized area, so most of the exports of the country come out of this region. And so we push a lot on that area. Our scale-ups are not only scale-ups on the technical side, or they also look to the industry, and we push also that. So you have to figure out what is your right assets and push them, because we all in the world, we all have a space to keep growing, and we have seen that in the Scale, for example, network.
Thank you, Filipe.
Thank you.
I think we can now take a moment to invite all the participants in this call to the Porto ScaleUp Porto booth. To continue exploring about the wonderful things you're doing there and to interact with some of the colleagues as well. Thank you very much for joining this.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Please visit us, and we are very welcome to keep in touch from the ScaleUp booth or even after to learn from each other and to keep cooperating. Thank you very much, Kriya, for your questions and for the session.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.